Hi, everyone. It's really great to be here virtually. I'm Shira, and today we're going to talk about how to build products and features that users trust. But I'm going to start with a story, a real story that happened to me about 10 years ago. It was in 2015. It was in the evening. I had a party of my MBA friends, and it was in a city that's not very far from my home, but somewhere I never visit, so I don't really know the routes. And this event finished pretty late, around 1 a.m., and I got back to my car and I launched Waze. I guess many of you probably know Waze and use Waze, and I use Waze a lot for navigation. So I launched Waze and started driving. And the roads were pretty empty. It's the middle of the night. I'm driving, and in a specific point, it told me to turn left to a highway. But it felt to me like it's the opposite direction than what I need. But I didn't really have time to think. The light was green. There were a few cars there, so I had to continue. And I turned left and started driving. And it was the opposite direction, but it meant for me to do that and to leave on the next intersection. But then the next intersection was closed for some construction work in the middle of the night, and I had to continue. And then it rerouted me and added 20 more minutes to my drive. And then I started feeling a bit nervous because I wasn't even sure I have enough fuel to get home. I had enough fuel to get home on a normal route, but not on a very long one. So it wasn't such a nice drive, but eventually I managed to get home. And eventually I realized what happened there. What happened is that Waze saw a few relevant routes for me, and it chose one route that seemed the best for him because it was supposed to take 1 minute less than the others, but it was twice the distance. So from some reason, Waze decided that this is the best route because it will save me a minute or maybe two. And eventually, with the road closing and stuff like that, it was a really bad idea. So since then, it really changed the way I use Waze until today. And it's almost 10 years since this happened. And I still remember this story till today because it was so unpleasant. So every time I use Waze, I always check all the routes manually, and I find the route that I prefer and choose it. I will never let the app choose for me. I totally lost trust in this feature. So this is a real story, and till today, till this morning, I still use Waze this way because I don't trust the feature. So hi everyone, it's great to be here virtually, and I'm Shira. I've been in tech for about 20 years. I started as a software engineer and then moved to product management, and I've worked for Microsoft for about 14 years. I've led various AI products and teams who work on AI products, and today we're going to talk more about AI products and how to create trust there. Today I have my own business. I have a product management school here in Israel, and I also have a lot of sessions and workshops and lectures around AI and leveraging AI in our day-to-day. So today we're going to talk about how to create trust with AI systems. We'll talk about what does that mean and how we can do that well. But I'll start with why is it even important? Why do we need to create trust? So clearly, we want users to use our products. We want them to use the products that we create, to like them, to buy them. And if they won't trust them, they probably just won't use them. So it will also harm their retention and the brand and many metrics that are important for us. So we want users to trust our products. We agree about that, I'm sure. But how do we do that? How is trust created, or how is trust lost? So the first use is very critical. The first time that the user uses an app is critical because if something won't work well, if they won't trust it, if it's unclear how this app is going to work, people just won't return to the app and won't use it. So it's very important to nail it in the first use. Trust is also built slowly. It takes time to build the trust, but it can reduce slowly as well. So if I'm using a product, but in some cases it doesn't work perfectly or it's unexpected, then I can lose trust over time. And trust can also break in one moment, in a specific event, specific critical event, like what happened to me with this Waze feature. And it really changed how we use the product till today. And if I had another alternative, I would probably leave the product overall. So building trust with any product is important. But when we think about AI products, it's much more complex, right? Because we don't really know how the product is going to behave with AI products. We are building products that we know are sometimes unexpected. It's not like creating a save button that is supposed to work in 100% of the cases. Today, when we build AI or AI features, we know that there are some issues, there are some hallucinations. We know that in some cases, we will be wrong. So how can we build trust with a product that might sometimes be wrong? So I'm going to cover 4 principles that can help us build trust with AI products. I'll show some examples from products that we all know, and some tips about how can you take that to your products. And the first principle I'm going to cover is transparency and explainability. Let's see a few examples that will help understand what I'm talking about. So let's say you're sitting in a self-driving car and the car is moving, and this is what you see. How do you feel? Not so pleasant, right? But if that's what you see, how do you feel then? Probably much better, right? Because you understand that the car is probably understanding what's happening, and it will probably stop if needed. And this is based on research showing that sharing system considerations, internal considerations, can help create trust. So if you think about it, the right system is not any better than the left system. It will work the same, but it will create much more trust. Another example for people who prefer public transport is for buses. I use buses a lot. If I were there, I would ask you how many of you are using buses and public transport in your day-to-day. So I use buses a lot, and I used to use an app called Move It. And I would get to the bus station, and you probably know this situation. You get to the bus station, you check the app, you see that the bus is coming in 2 minutes. It's marked in green, so it's live. You know that the bus is really coming in 2 minutes. It's real-time data. But then those 2 minutes become 5 minutes or even 10 minutes. And sometimes the bus disappears from the list, and you start thinking, is there any chance I missed the bus and I didn't see it? Or maybe this bus never existed? What's going on? And that used to happen to me a lot, and I couldn't really trust those apps. And then a friend recommended me to try another app called Bus Nearby. And with Bus Nearby, I can actually view the map of all the relevant buses, like you can see here, and I can see them moving on the map. I can also tap a bus and see more information about it, like what you see here. So I can see the timestamp of this location, so I can understand if this is up to date or not. And I can also see some info like the plate number, which is something that I don't really need, right? I'm waiting for a bus, I don't need the plate number of the bus that is coming. But if I see this information, I know that this bus is real and it's really coming. There's no way this bus isn't real because I have the plate number. I can also see the buses moving on the map. So if there's a lot of traffic and those 2 minutes become 5 or even 10, and I see the bus moving very slowly, stuck in the traffic, I will blame the traffic. I won't blame the app for lying to me. So again, here, the app is sharing some internal system considerations, internal data that you can say that I don't really need as a user, but it really helps create the trust. Another example from Salesforce is a system that provides some recommendations. And in this case, they share a recommendation, an AI-based recommendation, but it's unclear why they got to this result. So they provide some information for explainability. So we don't know exactly what happened there, but they do provide the top predictive factors that help get to this decision. And when I get all this information and these factors, I can trust the system because I know how it got to a specific result. So to summarize the first principle, transparency and explainability, we want to provide information about the system's considerations, even if these are internal considerations that can be helpful. And we also want to explain how a result was computed. So if we think about how to take that to your product and your day-to-day, here are a few tips. So for main system decisions, we should map the main system decisions, and for each of them, we can think about how to improve the transparency. So we can map those considerations, and for each of them say, how can we reflect that to the user? And if we reflect this internal consideration, will that create trust? We can also think about how to improve the explainability, and we want to provide an explanation on how we got to a specific result and how it was computed. And if we don't have all the context and all the explainability we want to have, we can at least share some top decision factors, like the example we saw from Salesforce. The second principle I'd like to cover is reliability and consistency. And in this case, I want to share a story about something that happened to me as well. All the stories are real. With a Google speaker, I have a Google speaker at home in my living room. And one day my husband used it to play some music. And after some time, he went out, left the house, and left it playing the music. And after a while, I wanted to turn off the music. I came to the speaker and I said, "Okay, Google," but he didn't hear me because it was playing music. So I went even closer, and then I said, "Okay, Google, stop," and it still couldn't hear me. And I came really closer and said, "Okay, Google, stop," and it still didn't hear me. So I had to go back to my phone, open Spotify, turn off the music manually. So it took me a lot more time and a lot of steps to do it. But on the next time that I'll need to do it, I'll probably just use the long route because I know that this is going to work. So I'll go to my phone and do it manually. I won't try to go closer to the device and say, "Okay, Google," more and more times, because I don't really trust it. I know that it's inconsistent, and in some cases it won't work when it's playing music. Another example from Tesla's autopilot. So in this case, it's not a part of the product, but it's data that they share about the product. And in this case, they share the miles driven per accident. And you can see in these graphs that you can see that how many miles are driven per accident when using autopilot, when not using autopilot, but using a Tesla, and the overall average in the United States. So you can really see how this autopilot technology really helps improve this metric. So when I see this information, maybe as a new customer that is thinking about buying a Tesla, that can really help create the trust because I get real data that helps me make the decision and trust the product. Another thing that I'd like to talk about here is around how we handle errors and how we can handle errors gracefully and create more trust. Because we know that we will have issues and errors. This is something that we know that's going to happen for every system, but especially with AI. And let's see an example from ChatGPT. In this case, that's a screenshot from before ChatGPT was connected to the web. So it had information by January 2022. So if I'd ask, "What is Midjourney?" it won't really know the answer. So it will say, "As of my last update in January 2022, there isn't a widely known concept, company, or term called Midjourney." And it explains that it's not connected to the web. So this doesn't feel like an error, right? It doesn't feel like a failure to the user. But as a user, I didn't get any value. I didn't get what I needed. Another example, in this case from Gemini, I asked it to create a QR code for my website. And it said, "I can't create QR codes. You can go to Google and search for QR code generators." And it provided me a link. So again, here it doesn't feel like an error, but it didn't give me what I needed. Another example from Claude. You probably know, if you use Claude a lot, that Claude is the top liar if you think about LLMs. So if you try to ask about yourself, for example, I try to ask about myself, and he told me that Shira Weinberg Harel is an Israeli entrepreneur and business executive. That's maybe close, but then it said told me some more lies. She's the co-founder and CEO of SafeChain, a blockchain cybersecurity startup. That's interesting. And also, apparently, in 2022, I was named one of the most influential people in blockchain. So I've been in tech for over 20 years, but I know almost nothing about blockchain and cybersecurity. This is definitely not my area. But it really sounds like something you can trust. So we need to be to think about the results that we get and check everything that AI provides to us. But they actually improved. So earlier this month, I tried the same query, the same prompt, and this time it started with this description. It told me that since you're asking about a very obscure person, I should note that I try to be accurate, but may hallucinate details when discussing individuals who have limited public presence. So maybe the problem is my public presence, I don't know. So you can see that they're improving as well. And in the past, it would really break trust if they hallucinate those tools. And things are getting better, but we still have a lot to do. So to summarize the second principle of reliability and consistency, we want to create a consistent performance and a consistent experience. And we want to handle errors gracefully and provide constructive feedback to the users so they'll be able to understand why something happened. And if you want to take that to your day-to-day and to your products, what you want to do is to map the potential errors, or any cases where the system can't perform what the user asked. Maybe it's not really an error. And for each of these, think about how can the system fail gracefully? And even if the system was human, what would this person say? And in many cases, that will help you think about the result that you want to provide. The third principle that I'd like to cover is automation versus user control. And this is a very delicate balance that we have in AI products because we want to automate everything for the users and make everything very easy, but we also want to make sure that we let the user control if needed and avoid crisis. So here I have another story from the time I was working for Microsoft, and I worked on Cortana, which is Microsoft Digital Personal Assistant. And one of the products that I've led was the voice skills of Cortana within the Teams app. So I could launch the Teams app on my mobile and say, hey, Cortana, send a message to my next meeting that I'm running late, or call Danny. Or in this case, someone from the team actually used Cortana when it was an internal version, and they used it and said, hey, Cortana, call Satyan. Satyan was a guy in our US team, one of the developers. But eventually what Cortana did was to call Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO. And that's because his name is Satya Nadella, and even his alias is Satya N, and that's what Cortana chose to do. Now, you can imagine what happens when you work in a company and something like that happens with the product that you're building, right? No one wants to ship a product that might cause something like that. And no one wants to call their CEO by mistake. So how can we solve that? It's not very easy to solve, right? I mean, we can ask the user if they're sure every time they make a call. But the whole idea was to automate. The whole idea was to make the process lighter and shorter and make it easier. So what we did here was to define critical actions. A critical action, in this case, is to call someone that I never call, like Satya. So if I call Danny a few times a week, calling Danny won't be a critical action, and even if I call them by mistake, it's not really a problem, not a big problem. But if I never call Satya, and now I try to call Satya, something here doesn't make sense, and that's a critical action. So in this case, we will ask the user if they're sure. And if you think about it, it's a bit like with real people. If I add a personal assistant, and I would tell this personal assistant to call my colleague Danny, he or she would call them. But if I'll say, call Satya, the CEO, she will say, or he will say, Satya, do you want to call Satya, the CEO? right? So what we can do here is build something similar that have this distinction and knows when something might be critical and ask the user before they do something. Another example from Google Photos in this case. So you probably know this screen where you get some recommendations from Google Photos, and they try to cluster specific people in your photos. And they won't ask about any photo, right? Because they want to automate it. But once in a while, they will ask you, because if they're not sure, they don't want to make a mistake. And it can also provide feedback to the system, and then they can continue and improve and measure based on this feedback. So in some cases, they're pretty sure they can decide that they should cluster the faces, but if they're not sure, they will decide to ask the user. So to summarize the third principle about automation versus user control, we want to make sure that we balance between automating to letting the user make the decision. And we want to pay special attention to critical actions because we want to avoid crises, and that's really important. And if we think about how can you take that to your day-to-day and to your products and features, what you should do is to map the user journey and think about where is the product making decisions for the user? And for each of these decisions, in which terms would a specific decision be a critical decision? Calling someone that I normally call is not critical. Calling someone that I never call is critical. So how do we define what is critical? And then we can think about how should the system behave or how should the product behave in each of the cases. So if calling a specific person is not critical, then the system doesn't have to do anything additional, just make the call. But if calling someone is critical, the system will ask and verify with the user, in my case. The fourth principle that I'm going to talk about is around privacy and security, which is very important in any product that we build, and also and especially with AI products. And also if you think about the user experience point of view. And here I have a pretty old story from when we used to build a Windows Phone. There was a phone by Microsoft years ago called Windows Phone, and the team that I was working in worked on this product as well. And one of the things that we used to do is to learn in the first few days of usage, to learn where does the user live and where do they work. And why do we need to do that? Because we want to provide value to the user, like this recommendation, for example. So we could say, okay, we know that you need to get back home or you need to get to a meeting at the office because we know where you live and we have access to your calendar, but we also see that there's a lot of traffic. So maybe you should leave now to make sure that you'll be there on time. So we had a bunch of features that are supposed to provide recommendations based on this, but when a new product, a new phone learns in a few days where do you work and where do you live, it might be a bit creepy, right? And we don't want users to feel like that. So what we did there was to define a concept called progressive disclosure. And that means that we're sharing the system's learning on the right context and the right time. So let's say we learn that you live in a specific place, we will ask that. So the phone would ask, is this your home? And we'll also explain why we need this information. How can this help you as a user? And show this on a map, and the user can decide to say yes or no. So only once the user says yes and confirms this, we know that the user told us that this is where they live and that we can use this information. And only then we start using this information. We save it in what used to be Cortana's notebook. It's like the settings. So we saved it, and then we started using that for recommendations and additional scenarios. Another important thing around privacy and security is that we want to explicitly share which data is being shared and which data isn't. Like this example from Google Photos, where you can clearly understand which data is being shared with the app and why they need this information. So If I'd like to summarize this fourth principle of privacy and security, I'll start with the fact that protecting the privacy and the personal information of the users is critical. And I didn't talk about that, but it's critical, and that's usually a part of all the usual processes that we already have. In addition, we want to explicitly share which data is being shared and how we're going to use the data that the user is sharing with us in order to create this trust with the system or the app. And if we learn some additional information about the user from usage, we can disclose that gradually and in the right context. So if you want to think that to how you can use that in your product and your day-to-day, what you want to do is to map the PII data in your system. And first, make sure that the data is protected. That's top priority. Also, you want to make sure that the user is aware that the data is being accessed or collected. And in some cases, it's easy to miss that. So we want to make sure that the user understands that, because we don't want them to be surprised and then immediately lose trust in the app. So we can then explain why the system needs the data and what's the value that the user is going to get by sharing this data with us. And if the system is learning from this data as well, we want to explain the learnings in the right context and connect it to the user value. So to summarize everything, I want to use one last example that covers a few of the principles. And that's also a real life example from a feature that I've worked on in Microsoft a few years ago. It shipped since then, but I worked on that before. And back then we used to call it action items from meeting. Today it shipped as part of Copilot for Teams. But when we worked on that before, the idea was to learn from the meeting, from the transcription, learn what people are talking about, understand the action items, assign them to specific people, and send this summary. So let's talk a bit about how this is actually working. So we have the meeting transcription. That's something that today we all know, right? We have a lot of tools that can do that using AI, but how much do you trust it? How much do you trust it to do a perfect job? Probably not so much, right? It's really helpful, but it won't be perfect. It will have some issues because it's based on AI. And also in some cases, many people sit in the same room. Some are closer to the mic, some are not near the mic. Some people have various accents. So there might be some issues here. Based on this transcription, we extract the action items for specific attendees. So we understand what are the action items from the transcription and who are the people who should be assigned to them. How much do you trust that when it's based on the meeting transcription? Probably a bit less, right? Maybe it can help, but in some cases it will be wrong. Now, based on that, we create a summary email. We tag people on their action items and send it out. How much how much do you trust this feature? Would you use it for all your meetings and let it summarize, create the action items, and send those emails automatically? Probably not, right? Because we know that once in a while, there will be a mistake, and then that can really harm us. So let's see how we can use the principles that I covered earlier to solve this problem. So the first one was around transparency. And one thing we can do here is to show the transcription during and after the meeting, and also mark it as AI-generated draft. So users can actually see during the meeting to see the transcription being created, and it's very clear to them with all this information and the real-time transcription and this mark as a draft. They can tell that this is being created by AI, and there might be some issues there. The second principle is reliability. And in this case, we want to show the extracted action items as suggested and only show them to the meeting owner. Okay, so we don't say, okay, these are the action items and we're sure this is ready, you can send it out. We show them as suggestions, and then it definitely helps the meeting owner, but they don't have to use it and send it as it is. When we talk about automation versus user control, then we want to allow the user to provide feedback and to make corrections. But we do want to automate and provide the result that's ready, but they can go over the result, make any corrections, provide any feedbacks, add anything they'd like, and only then choose manually to send the summary or send the action items when the user feels it's ready. So we do maybe 80% or even 90% of the work for the user, but the user eventually goes over it and makes any fixes and changes. And even if it works in 100%, in this case, the user can verify and send it when they really trust the result. So to summarize the principles that we covered, we talked about transparency and explainability. We talked about reliability and consistency. We talked about automation versus user control and privacy and security. All these principles can definitely help you when building your AI products or any AI features within your product. Because when we build AI features, it's much harder to create trust. And we don't want to break trust with the users with a crisis like what happened to me with Waze and any additional examples that I showed. So thank you. This is my mail, and you can feel free to scan the QR code and connect on LinkedIn, send any messages, let me know how was the session for you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you.